Well, this video is pretty much unscripted. I haven't prepared any notes for this. I'm just going to kind of speak from the heart and I'll just explain how I feel about these particular two YouTubers. So it's SerpentZA, Winston Sturzel, and Laowhy86, Matthew Tai. Now, there's a lot of people out there that have made this style of video before, critical of these two people, and it's for different reasons from really this video. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with these two guys, they're basically, for lack of a better term, kind of anti-China propagandists. Now, I have to quickly explain what propagandist means when I say propagandist. A propagandist is just someone who puts forward a particular political narrative or a particular political point of view. Propaganda is not necessarily good or bad. It's just a narrative. And I'll explain where they were when I started watching them about 6 years ago, and where they are now, and what type of videos they are now, and hopefully that will paint the picture of why I'm referring to them as propagandists. Before I continue with the video, I will say that I don't dislike either of these people. I don't have any feelings of animosity towards either of them, but I have found a reason to discontinue watching the content they produced. The content they continue to produce, you know, and I think maybe you should consider discontinuing it as well. Now, I started watching their videos in 2016, and I didn't watch their individual channels at first. I watched the ADV China channel, and the ADV China channel was basically like motorcycle travel vlogs. So what they would do is they would get on their motorbikes in Guangdong province. You know, Winston at the time lived in Shenzhen, Matthew lived in Huizhou. They would get on their motorbikes and they would make videos going on a motorbike ride around Guangdong province and talk about Chinese culture. So you were kind of getting like a cultural, you know, kind of like a culture show talking about Chinese culture, the good and the bad, and you were getting it in sort of like a travel vlog format, or kind of like an adventure moto travel vlog format where it's done on motorbikes. And for a while I didn't watch their individual channels at all. For a couple of years I just watched ADV China, the motorbike channel. And so it took me a while to watch their individual channels, because at the time, and even now, I was far more interested in travel vlog content than anything political. So maybe that's my bias. I don't know. I mean, you can be the judge after you've watched this video and taken in, you know, the things that I'm saying. So I watched their channel and I continued to watch it, and then I started watching their individual channels, and they, you know, they produce kind of more of these cultural pieces, and it was the same sort of cultural stuff, talking about, you know, the culture of China, Chinese culture, the way Chinese people are, the way China is, etc., etc. It was generally reasonably balanced, and you could tell that they were self-censoring a lot, because when you're living in authoritarian China, you don't go around slagging off the government. You know, you just don't. Bad idea. So you could tell that they were self-censoring, but at the same time you couldn't demand of them that they speak on controversial issues, because it just would be a really, really bad idea to do so. And look, their story is long and complex, and I don't know, I can't speak to be an expert to it, and there's a lot of moving parts to their story and to the policies that were happening in China and the things that happened in China. I know that there was a lot of what happened under Xi Jinping's rule was all about, ramping up nationalism and increasing sort of xenophobic hate against foreigners, and getting rid of foreign speaking, like English speaking foreign language teachers out of the schools. We don't want foreign influence, etc, etc, etc. Xi Jinping and his policies and his decisions have really, it's been like a big cultural leap backwards, to be honest. I can't say really any good things about it, but for those two guys, life was becoming difficult to stay there, and obviously at some point the two of them got together and decided, well, we have to move back. And for Matthew it means moving back to the USA, because that's where he's from, and for Winston it means moving to the USA and getting a visa to do so. Winston has said that he's not willing to speak on what his visa status is, because people will use it as ammunition against him. I'm not going to get into that. I don't really care. It's not really relevant, because I'm not talking about that anyway. But for him it means moving to the United States, because he's from South Africa, and if you know anything about the politics in South Africa and the politics in South Africa over the last few years, you know that it's a really, really bad place. A lot of racism, very, very high crime, dangerous place to live, not the sort of place that you should live in if you can get out. And I've met plenty of South African people here in New Zealand, and I speak to them about South Africa, and I ask them, and there's nothing good that they say, or not many good things they say about South Africa. So basically, if you can get out, you should get out. So it's definitely good that Winston has done that, and hopefully, as enough time elapses, he'll be able to stay in America and I don't know, become a resident, become a citizen, whatever. But what I noticed, and I could sort of foresee this happening, is that as soon as they left China, I thought to myself, oh, okay, I can see what's going to happen here. Like, within a fairly short period of time, suddenly all of their content is going to change from being like a cultural show about the culture of Chinese people, and now it's mostly going to be massive political hit pieces on the Chinese government. And is that a good idea? Now, that's a very complicated question. I'm not going to answer that, at least not just yet. But I could sort of foresee that this was the route that they were going to take. Not such a great idea in my personal opinion, but there's huge ramifications for this, and I wonder sometimes whether these two guys have actually thought it all through and had to think about it. Now, just before I get into that, I'll just quickly touch on the history of China. Like, I'm not a historian, I'm not a historical expert, I don't have all of the answers. I've read a little bit, I've watched educational videos. I don't know a lot about it, but I know a little. So I want to at least acknowledge and just put it out there that, look, whilst I know a little, I'm not an expert, but there is one thing that I think is worth putting out there that I think maybe these two guys haven't really taken into consideration. And I saw it actually in a video from a channel called Caspian Report, which is an Indian guy who makes geopolitical videos, and he talked about why China will probably always be authoritarian. And you think about it like this: China, and this is where China and Russia are kind of the same, and why they'll probably always be authoritarian and probably always be an autocracy. When you look back and you watch those educational videos, you read those articles about ancient China, and about how you had all of these warring states and warring periods, and the borders of China constantly were in a state of change and flux, and nothing ever really lasted, and this went on for 5,000 years. And so the Chinese people will tell you we have 5,000 years of history. and then of course Winston and Matthew will say, no, you've only got 70 years of history because that's when the Communist Party, came about. Well, I mean, it's honestly, whichever definition you go through, it's not really important. But consider this, and this was the point from the Caspian Report video. Will China always be authoritarian? Possibly. Why is that? And it's because of geography. So you've got a geographic situation in China where the cities on the coast are able to trade, make goods, trade goods, sell those goods, make money, prosper, become profitable. You have people on the inland, so all of the inland areas, you talk in Xinjiang and Tibet, and just what's the other ones? Is it? I can't remember the names of all the inland provinces. Qinghai, is it? And Inner Mongolia. So these inner provinces don't have that ability to have access to sell goods easily without a whole lot of sort of freight cost that's involved. And this is actually why America has been prosperous, because it has this great big river in the middle of the country called the Mississippi, which is like a natural highway that everyone can use in the middle of America. So you've got the inland of China, and you've got your provinces that aren't able to financially prosper and sell their products, and then you've got the coastal China, which can. So you've got two sets of Chinese people living in two very different worlds, and you get all kinds of issues that come about because of that. I mean, your coastal people don't want to subsidize the inland people, and your inland people feel jealous of the coastal people. And anyway, it's complicated, but that's kind of the basic fundamental idea of it. And so in the Caspian Report video, he makes the point that to keep China whole, together, to keep everyone relatively happy, the government, the authoritarian government, the autocratic government, essentially taxes the hell out of the coastal people to subsidize the inland provinces, redistribute the wealth, because this is what socialist policy is, redistribute the wealth and maintain authoritarian control over all of it, purely in the interest of stability and retaining power. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of negative things that happen because of that, and that's basically what the content of their videos is. And I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with their content. There's nothing wrong with criticizing authoritarian rule. I mean, it should be criticized in the hope that one day, it can be made better. But at some point, you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. Is this worth? Is it worth me? Like, if I'm Winston Sturzill and if I'm Matthew Ty, and if I'm the viewer who's watching their videos, is it worth me investing my life, hours of my life, into this topic and getting involved in it? And China is not the only autocratic ruler out there that's doing bad things and has issues. And the last year, of course, we saw Russia invade Ukraine, and that's ongoing, and that could potentially last for years. Who knows where that's going to go? And then you've got Iran. And anyway, the point is that there's lots of places in the world where bad things are happening, not only China. And so I look at Winston and Matthew's videos, and I'm going to say for maybe 3 years now, since they moved to the US, which must have been somewhere around 2019, it's basically been the same shit over and over and over and over. It's just, Chinese government this and Chinese government that, and China is lying to you about this, and China is doing this bad thing here, and sure, they're lying. They're doing the bad things. There's plenty of other places in the world where that sort of thing is happening as well, but why are you not speaking about those too? And that's not a whataboutism. That's not what about this and what about that. Because this is a strategy that people will use to deflect away from the conversation. But why is it that like 100% of your content seems to be devoted to criticizing the current Chinese government, and that's like all of it, and like there's nothing else anymore. You guys don't make those, you know, quirky cultural videos anymore where you talk about, you know, what kind of foods Chinese people eat and how their culture is and how dating works and, you know, how they live their lives and, you know, the transport and what they do with marriages and deaths and stuff, and just, you know, all of that cultural stuff. So that cultural stuff's gone. All of your motorbike stuff is gone as well. You can't make new motorbike videos. Every time you guys upload new you know, ADV China videos, it's all just you know, you take old motorbike footage and you just do a new commentary on top of it where you're talking about current political events. So your content is like getting stale too. That's another issue. One of the things that you are aware of if you've ever produced your own YouTube videos is that you can't just go stale. You have to keep reinventing yourself and developing and changing it into something else, and because you are growing as a person and you need to grow as a YouTuber as well. And you see that with a lot of YouTubers are quite successful at this, and some of them are not successful at this and they fail and they go stale. A good example would be PewDiePie. You know, everyone knows PewDiePie. And PewDiePie, you know, when he started, you know, producing content on YouTube, he was doing these, you know, gaming let's play video type things, which really appealed to quite a young audience, you know, sort of teenage audience, you know. I'm going to say teenage males, I don't know. And then as Felix himself, as he grew up, you know, he developed more himself, and it's not really so much about gaming let's play stuff now. It's more about humorous social commentary stuff. So, you know, he has developed and reinvented himself, you know, and to stay fresh and to stay relevant. And you see this with actors in TV shows and things and movies, and you see this like in professional wrestling. That's a good example of it. You think about the career progression of a professional wrestler. It's never going to stay the same, and if it does stay the same, the audience ends up hating you because you're stale. So, like, everyone knows who John Cena is, right? John Cena, you know, the kind of the forever baby face, and really for about the last 15 years, his wrestling persona didn't change at all. He's just this kind of babyface guy that wears bright t-shirts and never give up, and that's it. And that's the extent of his character. And like he never had a heel turn, never turned into a bad guy over the past roughly 15 years. I'm going to say ever since about 2008, 2009, people have been booing him because his shtick is old and stale and it sucks. And now he doesn't even really wrestle anymore. He's, you know, doing movies and stuff. And so at least for the wrestling fans, for the WWE wrestling fans, at least it's like, thank God, we don't have to deal with John Cena anymore. And so here's another example. Like in the YouTube land, we've got a guy named Louis Cole who has been quite static on about 2 million subscribers for several years now, and he's made travel videos for a hell of a lot of travel videos. He's probably one of the more successful travel video creators, but with that being said, his content is stale and has been stale for a while, and he's actually been struggling to reinvent himself because he used to just go on these non-stop trips. We're talking going back in time, so sort of 2015, 2016. He was going jet setting all around the world, just going, you know, trips crazy all over the place. And then it started to get stale. People started to get bored of it, get sick of it. And he would start doing slightly new things to try to reinvent it. Like he did a big world trip on a flight, on a plane. You know, that was like the world trip. And like recently, he did a drive across America in an electric van. So, you know, there are specific travel things that he's done to try to reinvent himself, but he's still really fighting back against that whole thing of being stale. So those are a couple of examples there. Geez, even Casey Neistat, the famous blogger, he was getting stale too. Arguably not relevant at all today in the world of YouTube. Even people are saying Mr. Beast today on YouTube is getting stale because it's the same old stuff over and over and over. And I just wonder, for people who are continuing to watch Laowhy86 and SerpentZA, how long is it going to take you before you realize that their content is stale too, and it's the same old stuff over and over and over again? Have a think about that. Just let that let that sink in for a minute. Think about how much variety is actually in their channel. I have actually left a few comments, on their videos in the past, and say that, maybe your videos could go a wee bit beyond what you're doing. Like, maybe, you guys could do historical type videos. Maybe you can talk about what happened in ancient China, going back beyond 150 years ago. Never seen anything like that. Maybe you guys could, talk about, maybe shift your channel into other stuff like into Marxism around the world, because that's certainly something that we seem to be seeing in the Western world right now with woke culture, and Marxism is just spreading its tentacles everywhere. Maybe that's something that you guys could transition into and just move away from slagging off China all the time, because honestly your content is stale and I'm sick of watching it. Now again, doesn't mean that I hate you guys, Winston and Matthew, and I have a funny feeling Matthew might possibly watch this video. I don't know. He has watched some of my videos in the past. I don't hate you guys at all. I don't dislike you as people, but your content sucks, and it's stale, and it's the same old stuff over and over. And I don't think you're giving a lot of consideration to the fact that there's other countries, other leaderships in the world that are doing the same stuff as China, and you're not giving a lot of consideration to that. And just to top this, just to finish off this video, I know this has been a lot of long rambling, but just to finish this thing off, is this what you want your life's work to be? So, I just asked your audience to have a think about, are they going to continue to spend their own time watching you and the stuff you're doing? But, when we all only live once, we're only on this planet for X number of years. Do you want this to be your life's work, your body of work? Everyone chooses their own path in life to a certain degree, and for example, like a Greta Thunberg, for example, she wants to be the climate activist kind of, fly in the ointment type thing, and people who become politicians in political parties can potentially become the leaders, and that's the path that they've chosen. The path that you guys seem to have chosen for yourselves is to be the slag off China guys. And I'm not saying that the Chinese Communist Party shouldn't be criticized. Yeah, they should be, but you don't have to do it forever, and you don't have to be the only ones to do it. And there's other things that you could be looking into as well. I mean, a lot of the conservative people out there who are making conservative political content are talking about much broader things, which is like the woke stuff with the Black Lives Matters and the trans people's rights, and the pronouns, and the preferred pronouns, and it just goes. There's a lot of politically correct stuff out there today, ideas and ideologies which are actually just Marxist, communist ideas in disguise. And a lot of the commentators that are making those types of videos, they're talking about much broader things, and you guys are just narrowing in on China, and it's always just China, 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 China. And I watch your videos and I think you could be doing so much more You could be doing so much better, but you're just doing the same stuff over and over. I've had enough of watching it. And do you want this to be your body of work? Do you want this to be your life's work? You know, in another 10 or 20 or 30 years' time, do you want to look back on what you did with yourself, and are you going to be proud of it? Are you going to think that you did any good? You know, lest I remind you that, as far as we know, according to recorded history, China has never had democracy. They've had authoritarian rule long before the Communist Party. You know, they had emperors and they had kingdoms and they had, you know, constant state of flux and warring periods. As far as we know, they've never had democracy, and arguably that may be because of the geography. And so potentially this authoritarian autocratic rule is going to be around in China for hundreds of years to come. And have you stopped to consider that maybe you're putting your life's work into this for something that it might not be worth the effort? It might not be worth the effort. So I don't know if you guys have actually stopped to think about that. You know, is this worth it? Do you want this to be your life's work? So there we have. If you've made it to the very end, thank you very much for watching. Like I said, I haven't scripted this. I have no notes in front of me. I'm just speaking from the heart. It's just a criticism of SerpentZA and Laowhy86. Some things in there to think about for both those two guys and for anyone who's watching their videos. Some real things to think about there.